him, but then he had later in life got blessings and such. So, but we're going to look at today David and see some of the highs and lows that he went in, that he had throughout his life. Some of the, I guess, blessings today that we have, kind of for the highs that we have. Sometimes it's for us like getting a job or a better income or in work in general, just a better environment or promotion. For David, in his life, he started off as a, as you say, a farmer boy. He was a shepherd of his own flock. But later in his life, a big jump in his life was he became king. If you want to turn over to 1 Samuel, we'll be looking at in 1 and 2 Samuel most of this morning. If you look at 1 Samuel chapter 16, and if anybody has any comments or questions, feel free to ask them. We'll look at 1 Samuel chapter 16 and verses 1 through 13 talks about David being anointed as king. And God said unto Samuel, how long wilt thou mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from over Israel? Fill thine horn with oil, and go, and I will send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, and I have provided me a king among his sons. And Samuel said, how can I go? If Saul hear it, he will kill me. And the Lord said, take a heifer with thee, and say, I am come to sacrifice to the Lord. And call Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show thee what thou shalt do, and thou shalt anoint unto me whom I name unto thee. And Samuel did that which the Lord spake, and came to Bethlehem. And the elders of the town trembled at his coming, and said, comest thou peaceably? And he said, peaceably, I am come to sacrifice unto the Lord. Sanctify yourself, and come with me to the sacrifice. And he sanctified Jesse and his sons, and called them to the sacrifice. And it came to pass, when they were come, that he looked on Levi. I'm not sure. Sorry, I'm bad with names. And said, surely the Lord anointed is before him. And the Lord said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance, or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth him not as a man seeth. For man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Then Jesse called Abinadab, and made him pass before Samuel. And he said, neither hath the Lord chosen this. Then Jesse made Shimei to pass by, and he said, neither hath the Lord chosen this. Again Jesse made 7 of his sons to pass before Samuel. And Samuel said unto Jesse, the Lord hath not chosen these. And Samuel said unto Jesse, here are all thy children. And he said, there remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, send and fetch him, for we will not sit down until he comes hither. And he sent and brought him in, and he was ruddy and withal a beautiful countenance, and godly to look to. And the Lord said, arise and anoint him, that this is he. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from the day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Raham. I don't know how to say that, but so here you have Jesse with all his sons, but Samuel passed by all the other sons and came to the youngest. So it shows here in verse 11 that he was out there taking care of the sheep. So I don't know about back then, but I don't know if taking care of the sheep was kind of the low job on a totem pole. Basically, you just go out and watch the sheep versus sounds like all of his other brothers were in town with the rest of the family. So, but to have Samuel tell Jesse bring him in to see him, and then something that he could look forward to. And then when he became king, then later every battle that he went into, then David won. Talks about that in Samuel, 2 Samuel, 5, 6, and following that. There's several different places that they conquered while he was king.
The one thing he pointed out in 16, you read through verse 7, God told Samuel, said, don't look at his appearance or his physical stature. And then we get down, and we see that, where was that, in 12, it says he had bright eyes, he was good looking. And I always think about that as, at face value when it reads, it's almost a contradiction. Because God said, don't look at, the man,
Yeah.
don't look at inside. And then when they find David, like, oh, that's a good looking guy to be. And so it's still the point of, I think, maybe that's being made is, one is the appearance, that's physical stature. He's still boy David, and he probably get ready to get into this, is the idea that he's got a long ways to go before he becomes king. He's still a boy.
Yeah.
And so God says we need a king over the nations. And so here, probably Samuel, in my mind, I think he's going looking for a grown man
Yeah.
like his brother. And that's not what God said.
Well, I guess going back to that, this kind of is in the future kind of thing for David to be king. Back in verse 1, it talks about, actually it was 1 and 2, where Samuel's like, he's kind of scared to go and find a new king because Saul still was king at the time. So to say that Saul is going to, I guess, fall from his reign is why Samuel's kind of scared that he doesn't want to go out and try to find another king. Because think about it, if you find out that, hey, somebody else is taking my job, get rid of them, so you don't know when that who would try to take over from him.
How many times did Saul try to kill David?
Yeah.
You look at what he did there, what would he done to Samuel?
Because
That's the number I'm still trying to count. You're right.
it doesn't say out, kind of just read it off as it, but basically kind of like, hey, we're going to anoint you in secret, but you can't tell Saul at all, or kind of said just like, or you're going to die, because how many times try to kill him, and I don't think Saul knew at that time that David was supposed to be king later on, or David was supposed to be the one to take over for Saul. Is that? I never read anything that said that, right?
One thing you're talking about, the character, what you're bringing out, is Samuel was sent to appoint another king. And so when Samuel was serving not as a king, but in that capacity as leader. And when God took that away from Samuel, Samuel wasn't, he was upset, but not because he was losing the authority. He was upset because of the heart of the king. So now God says, okay, I took it away from you one time, gave it to somebody else. Now you gotta go anoint your second successor. And Samuel's like, and Samuel had the same attitude that Saul had. He was going after Saul. God uses him twice to do the same thing, to really fill his shoes.
Yeah.
I think that says a lot about the character of Samuel.
And then it doesn't tell the age of David when Samuel anoints him. I mean, I looked at kind of timelines and it was kind of seemed like teenage years, is kind of what it was said. So to, I guess, have that in your life later on as a goal, where you're kind of looking forward to, it was quite a bit later on in his life before David actually started to reign. So he had some, he still had growing to do, but at the same time, God knew in David's heart that he was going to be a good king. So kind of what it said, was it, for a man look at on the outward appearance, but the Lord looked on the heart. So basically looking at the inward man, not the outward.
Yeah, that's what God said to Samuel. But he didn't say you can't have a heart after God. A godly person and not be good looking. I mean, it's all right if you're
whole lot between being a child to becoming king. So, I guess with becoming king, then he kind of gained a house in general too, since he was king. So, he was blessed in that regards too. Other highs that we should have is also kind of growth, but also relationships. And so David, he had, he was given, was it Michal by King Saul, but that was later in life after David kind of worked for Saul. But I guess with that growth, then there's a lot of stuff between getting married and the newlywed phase, and then also just building a strong relationship with your spouse. But also with that, then we have to continue to strengthen each other in having a godly marriage. I guess when King Saul gave him a call to David was in 1 Samuel 18. 1 Samuel 18. And kind of the whole account to when Saul says that he's going to give Michal to David is from verses 17 through 30, but I'm going to skip down to verse 20. And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. And Saul said, I'll give him her, that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistine may be against him. Wherefore Saul said unto David, Thou shalt this day be my son-in-law in the one of the 20. So, yes, Saul was going to give Michal to David, but at the same time, was just going to trick him because in the, I guess, previous part of the chapter, then David tries to kill Saul by throwing a javelin at him. So it's kind of, I don't know, just a trick because Saul wants David dead, but David would like to have Michal as a wife. So it's kind of a David, in a way, kind of sacrificing himself to do what he can to get Michal as a wife. So in verse, then skipping down to verse 27 through 29. Wherefore David arose and went, he and his men, and slew the Philistines, 200 men. And David brought their foreskin, and they gave them to in full tale to the king, that he might be the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him Michal, his daughter, to wife. And Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. And Saul was yet the more afraid of David, and Saul became David's enemy continually. So not the bounty, but the kind of deal that they made was David was to go out and kill 100 Philistines and get their foreskins and bring them back to Saul.
Saul was trying to kill him with the Philistines, is what Saul was trying to do.
Yep.
He didn't think David could do it,
Yep.
so he's using him to try to get him killed off.
Yeah. And what did David do? He went and killed twice as many, and brought twice as many back. That's kind of like, even with your tricks, and it's no match between, for me, since I have God on my side. So, kind of just shows that he just went twice the distance for it. And then also it said that in verse 29, and Saul became David's enemy continually. So kind of that anger or that resentment against him just continually grew throughout his life. But since David loved Michal, he did what he could to basically have her become his wife.
Something to think about is also is he had a lot of respect for Saul, even though Saul tried to kill him all the time. And even later on when he's chasing him and stuff, he wouldn't kill him. He thought it an honor to be able to be the son-in-law of Saul. So Saul's trying to kill him. He has respect for Saul and he thinks it's an honor to be able to be part of his family. So
going to a shepherd boy to being a harp player for Saul to becoming part of his, I guess, by Saul's table, kind of his, not servant exactly, but
Well, there he was, he went out and fought.
yeah.
He was hard player, plus he went out and attacked the Philistines.
Mhm.
He went to war, but it's a war for him.
Yeah, but basically they're friends with each other, and basically, as you're saying, basically war buddies in a way. So they trusted each other, but then again, Saul didn't like David for it. In a way, God was on his side. So
We get to a certain point, and you see what God's doing for him, and he realized that he was losing into a battle.
mhm.
Hence the reason why he's resentment.
Yeah. And then just kind of more growth in relationships and as children, just building family and watching them grow. Later on, talks about the different sons David has throughout his life. So I know there's more that for highs with people, kids have. If you have a question.
Yeah, I was gonna say, kind of back with the, marriage and stuff to McCall, there was a lot more than just, oh, he got a wife out of it, because it is mentioned that she does care, and I don't know the exact verse, but I know later, she's the one that feels that he's losing himself. And having come from the family that he really wasn't worth a lot, she was one of the first people that truly cared for him other than like his mother. And so I know that that would probably mean a lot to him. And through the marriage, he also received Jonathan, who was the first real brother he ever had.
Yeah, Jonathan is Saul's son. So, yeah, just kind of growing and just being loved by, in a way, the family that wanted to kill him. I guess a little bit later on, or as Saul wanted to kill David. So,
Making it sound like Romeo and Juliet.
who knows, maybe that's kind of hard for it deeper. But, and then, some kind of other highs or highs that we like to have in our life is kind of peace in our life. No speed bumps or potholes along the way. Everything runs smoothly. I mean, in a way, for a lot of people, I would say having peace with your finances is a huge thing. I mean, David, I think, was pretty blessed from going to be a shepherd to being king to basically being able to raid the nations that he conquered throughout the wars while fighting for his nation. But have 2 Samuel chapter 8 where kind of talks about the spoils from his enemy that David receives when was it? Verses 2 Samuel 8, 9 through 12. When Toi, king of Ammon, heard that David had smitten all the hosts of Hadarziah, then Toi sent Joram his son unto King David to salute him and to bless him, because he had fought against Hadarezer and smitten him, for Hadarezer had wars with Toi and Joram in vessels of silver, vessels of gold, and vessels of brass. King David did dedicate unto the Lord with the silver and gold that he did dedicate to all nations which he subdued, of Syria and Moab, and of the children of Ammon, and of the Philistines and Amalek, and the spoils of Hadazar, son of Rehob, king of Zoar. So, kind of he was blessed with everything, but also he basically he gave thanks to the Lord for everything that he had been blessed with. It wasn't just he was taking it for himself. He dedicate unto the Lord the spoil. So,
That's a difficult thing, you know, you read, at least for me, you know, think about, Saul said, well, here's the dowry that I require. And so, but who he required it from, and you say, well, you know, how would we feel, you know, if Amy told Scott, you know, so, well, this is what I want if you're interested. Anyway, but this wasn't just, you know, go kill these people because, you know, for no reason. You know, Philistines were enemies against God because of their immorality of that nation. And so it wasn't that God was saying, well, just, you know, go kill people for no reason. You know, God was allowing it because it's a spiritual war that was taking place physically. You know, because how many times do you, through the judges, you see these people or other nations coming and trying to wipe out God's people, and it had to do with, you know, greed, you know, wealth, and those sorts of things. And so God allowed these things because it was based upon, probably based upon, you know, the immorality of that nation. God said, well, wipe their influence out.
well, also in that time frame, there's a lot of idols and such that different nations have. So, basically getting rid of all those, no other gods before them. So,
I was thinking about it's not just, oh, you know, you conquer them really easy, you know, there's this grind, there's this effort that has to be put into it, you know, a little while ago, you know, I had a lot of things going for me, and things were looking up, and then got laid off for a long time. So now I'm in this grinding process, in this season, that I need to remember that God has a plan for me, you know, I have to honor God, I have to have that presence of mind to know that
And that trust.
this season, I've got to trust Him.
mhm.
So,
And trust that He's going to be there for you to help you through it all. So, yeah. So, and then I guess along with peace, and we don't want any kind of turmoil or anything to happen. But I guess later on, it seems like David also runs into a hard part in his life where he kind of just gets in a rut and doesn't. Just kind of struggled. Also, he had kind of struggles in his life when he was under Saul, because Saul wanted to kill him. So that was probably not a very peaceful time for him at all. Running all the time and basically becoming a fugitive, basically at one point, and just hiding away from Saul and his army. So, so those are just a couple kind of points I have for some of the highs, and then some of the lows that I have. You have a kind of death of relationships. So I think one relationship that probably was sad for David was when Samuel died, because Samuel, I believe, would be probably David's mentor throughout this whole thing, because he helped guided David into becoming king, and anointed David as king. So that's probably a hard loss for David, and kind of a low. Got to write down where I think it's at the end of 1 Samuel where Samuel does pass. But no, so having that loss is kind of a low for him, but still David grew, things got better for him as he continued to conquer nations, and also just to grow. And then I guess another low for a relationship was King Saul actually takes Michal from him and marries after Saul tried to kill David, and David was on the run for so long, then Saul decides to have Michal married to another man. So that was probably a little finding that out once David found out about it. Then also, even though Saul was trying to kill him, and Jonathan, under Saul's command, tried to kill David also. Also, just the death of Saul and Jonathan together. That is found in 2 Samuel chapter 1. And that's kind of most of chapter 1, but going down to verse 3 and 4 is where it talks about it. Basically, a soldier comes to where David is at and tells him about what happened at the battle. And David said unto him, from whence comest thou? And he said unto him, out of the kingdom of Israel am I escaped. And David said unto him, how went the matter? I pray you, tell me. And he answered, that the people are fled from the battle, and many of the people also are fallen and dead. And Saul and Jonathan, his son, are dead also. So, going to verse 5, and David said unto the young man that told him, how knowest thou that Saul and Jonathan, his son, be dead? And the young man said, and young men that told him said, as I happened by chance upon Mount Gilead, behold, Saul leaned upon his spear, and lo, the chariot and horsemen followed hard after him. And he looked, and when he looked behind him, he saw me and called unto me, and I answered, here I am. And he said unto me, who art thou? And I answered, I am Amalek. And he said unto me again, stand, I pray thee, upon me and slay me, for anguish is come upon me, because my life is yet whole. So I stood upon him and slew him, because I was sure that he could not live after that he was fallen. And I took the crown that was upon his head and bracelet that was on his arm, and have brought them hither unto my Lord. So, kind of hearing from the person that sounds like slew Saul, to hear that I killed him, and Jonathan is also dead too, and Jonathan being basically a brother to David, would probably be a very sad and a very emotional time for David. Having somebody that he kind of, or not grew up with, but spent years fighting with and for, to be dead, even though Saul tried to kill him. So I think that would be a sad or a little part of his life to have for Saul, or for David.
I mean, down in 17, it makes a whole point to talk about how sad David was, and he said about, how the mighty were fallen, and when other people were rejoicing that, Saul had passed and that David was meant to be king, David was not in rejoicing. He was,
Or most people would be happy when their pursuer would be dead, so they don't have to worry about that anymore. To basically,
but even after all the years of being chased, he still respected Saul.
yeah. Well, even before that, I didn't go into it, but David had a couple of chances that he could kill Saul. There's one part where Saul and his men go into it's a cave that David was staying at, and they were asleep, and David went up and cut the part of his garment off, and I believe they take a spear or something with him, but basically showed that he was within arm reach to be able to kill Saul, but he didn't. He restrained himself because I guess you'd say he was a bigger man, that he was able to overlook Saul coming after him.
But, 1 Samuel 24:5, looked at it, it says, now hath
David. What time do we go to?
I got 4 or 5 minutes.
Okay. But, I guess to summarize chapter 12, I have it from verses 1 through 14. Basically, it talks about how a rich man comes into the land, and there's also a poor man that has a little ewe, which he had brought up and nourished, and it grew up together with him, with his children, and did eat of his own meat, and drank of his own cup, and lay in his bosom, and was unto him as a daughter. I guess, going to verse 4. And there came a traveler unto the rich man, and he spared to take of his own flock, and of his own herd, and dressed for the wayfaring man that was come unto him, but took the poor man's land, and dressed it for the man that was come to him. And David's anger was greatly kindled against the man, and he said to Nathan, As the Lord liveth, the man that hath done these things shall surely die, and he shall restore the land fourfold, because he did this thing, and because he had no pity. And Nathan said to David, Thou art the man. Thus saith the Lord, God of Israel, I anointed thee king over Israel, and I delivered thee out of the hand of Saul. And I gave thee thy master's house, and thy master's wives unto thy bosom, and gave thee the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would moreover have done unto thee such and such things. Wherefore thou hast despised the commandments of the Lord to do evil in his sight. Thou hast killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword, and hast taken his wife to be thy wife, and hast slain him with the sword of the children of Ammon. And now therefore the sword shall never depart from thy house, because thou hast despised me, and hast taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be thy wife. And he said unto the Lord, Behold, I will raise up evil against thee out of thine own house, and I will take thy wives before thine eyes, and give them away unto thy neighbor, and he shall lie with thy wives in the sight of this son. For thou didst it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel and before the sun. So, kind of Nathan come to David saying, Hey, here's a story for you. Does it sound familiar? And basically David's kind of no, and then kind of Nathan just kind of points back. It's like you kind of lost yourself taking from other people when you were rich already. So kind of losing self and not thinking about how it could affect others also. So just kind of a kind of interesting story that David said that he should kill a man, and it was himself that was the rich man that did the wrong. So sometimes we just gotta look back at our own lives and selves and think about how it might be affecting others around us. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah, David was very, very upset, thought it should be a harsh punishment. And I don't think he realized that he was giving God the idea that, okay, we're gonna make it harsh for you. What he did to David was not good for David at all. I mean, it was way worse. So, God had to be, but at least he saw that he had sinned. That's the thing. He realized he didn't like say, "No, I did it. You know, this is the reason that happened." Whatever. He didn't try to get out of it. He knew he was going to have to pay the consequences of what he'd done. So
And
it wasn't going to be good.
in verses 13 and 14, it kind of says that David repents for his sins for what he did. So he kind of lost himself, but with Nathan as a friend coming to him and talking to him, he kind of realized he had kind of fallen off the, I guess, kind of off the wagon of what's right and wrong. So